Hi, and welcome to this workshop on understanding how to have a disclosure and/or conversations with your child about sex addiction. My name is Dr. Piper Grant. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I am a certified sex addiction therapist. I am a family therapist, and I've had the honor to be in this field and work with a multitude of families impacted by sex addiction. If you have found your way here, I assume that in some way you too have been impacted by sex addiction and possibly have children of your own and are wondering how to have these conversations. In my work with children and families impacted by sex addiction, often the first question is, how do we even talk about this? What does this mean? What is this supposed to look like? What language do I use? What can we say? What shouldn't we say? And all the questions come up. So what I'm hoping is that in this workshop, you feel best armored with the tools, the language, the knowledge, all of the things to feel confident, not only going into one conversation, but being able to feel comfortable in having a multitude of conversations. Because what we're going to be talking about is not just setting up a conversation to happen and that's one and done. But when we're talking about impacts on an entire family and we're talking about impacts on children, it is a conversation that's going to have to happen throughout the lifetime, possibly. It's a conversation that's going to change as children get older and or have different life experiences and have different knowledge kind of bases come into them. So this workshop is to give you the foundation and hopefully give you the confidence to be able to move forward into those conversations. Let me tell you a little bit about where we're going to be heading though. So this is our introduction. Here we are. Hi, welcome. Nice to meet you. Nice to have you here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about kind of what everything's going to look like, go through some common questions, and that's our introduction video. Then we're going to jump into the second video. That's going to be looking at the impact of sex addiction on family and children. In this presentation, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be doing a small focus on the impact on families, but really what we're doing is we're actually going to be looking at the impact through the child's eyes. So we're going to be breaking down all the various impacts that children might have from sex addiction, and so that you are able to go through and think, okay, I can see that happening, I can not see that happening, oh, I haven't thought about that. Now, when you start in the video on the impact of sex addiction on family and children, that's also then when it's going to start corresponding to your workbook. So you've also received a printable workbook. I just print it and put it in and I just bind it, but whatever works best for you. And I will take you through in the videos understanding which pages you need to be starting with. So when you start with impact of sex addiction on family and children, I will note this starts on page 5 and let's get started. Okay, then we're going to go down to part 1. What we're moving into in part 1 is that's where we're really starting to talk about setting up a disclosure and having to kind of get your way through into having a conversation. So part 1 is going to be about assessment for disclosure and conversations. That's really like why to do a disclosure. In this section, I'm going to take you through assessing your readiness as parents. We're going to talk about why you would do a disclosure and the timing of a disclosure. Then we go into part 2 of that. That's going to be about the letter writing and preparation and or outline writing, where we're going to talk about how you prepare for a disclosure and what are you going to do in the disclosure. So in this section, what we're talking about is what to disclose. We're talking about boundaries. We're talking about language to use. That is kind of the meat of where you're going to be setting everything up. Then you move into setting up the disclosure. And this is like how to do the disclosure. This is the pre and post preparation. This is the process. This is thinking through how and where do you want to kind of set up the disclosure. And we're also looking at how do you have support for yourself and also support for your children. So this is it. This is where we're going through. By the time that you finish, you will have a workbook full of prompts for yourself, understandings, insights, and hopefully then better able to move forward into a disclosure and or conversations, however they look best for your family. And that's the thing. This is going to be your ability to tailor it and customize it to the needs and what's happening in your family. Here's the thing I want to start with though. Before we jump into that, I want to start because you might be feeling all your own feelings as you're coming into this and all your own questions. And so here's the thing that I just kind of want to name for you. These are the common questions that I get. I want to tell the kids, but he or she doesn't want to. So this is like something we're going to be weeding through as well. What happens when I said about parent readiness, what happens if parents are in different places? I don't want to expose them to something they don't know. That's often another common question, or another statement even. Parents will say, I don't believe that the children know anything. I don't believe that there's knowledge about what's going on. And I always kind of need to caution around this, because typically children know more than we actually give them credit for. They might not know about a sex addiction, let's just say specifically, but maybe they know that there's been betrayal. They at least know that there's been some discord or some changes happening in the household. And also in this question is, I don't want to share more than maybe is appropriate. So we look at that. Do we have to tell them everything? Another huge question. This is talking about boundaries. This is talking about language. This is talking about what's okay to share and what's not okay to share. We definitely get into that. They want to share everything and I don't want to. Again, kind of to that last question, weaving through what's going to be appropriate for what ages, developmental capacities, because even if same ages, maybe different developmental capacities, stages of life, all of these things. So we are definitely be talking about that. I don't think the kids know anything. That kind of goes back to, I don't want to expose them to something they don't know. Similarly, often the kids know more than we actually think that they know, or they're up to something. And of that point, what I want to note is that sometimes kids are making up far worse stories or telling themselves terrible things based on the little data that they're receiving. And so it can be really helpful to give them clarity and therefore peace of mind about what's going on. The kids don't need to know. That's often also what can come up, is like, again, to this idea, one parent wants to say something, but the other parent doesn't want to say something. And that, they don't need to know anything. We're going to talk about, has there been changes that maybe they've witnessed? Maybe nothing specifically in the family system, like no divorce, no separation, but has there been an increase in discord? Are you guys going to recovery meetings? Are you going to therapy? Is there more time spent out of the house, and things that they notice? Like, kids will often say to me, yeah, I knew something was up because every Tuesday night dad started leaving the house because dad was going to a meeting. Or I knew something was going on because mom was like carrying books around with her that she never carried around. And then they saw the content of the books. So maybe they don't need to know specifically about the sexual addiction and all the acting out behaviors, for sure, because we're going to be talking about boundaries around that. But maybe there needs to be some explaining about some changes that have happened. He or she just wants to make me look bad. This is also often a concern of like one parent wanting to pin the other parent. So we're going to talk about how to make sure that you guys get on the same page as parents. I need to tell them sooner than he or she wants to. Parent readiness, I said we're going to talk about that. For sure, sometimes one parent's like, I'm carrying the burden. Particularly sometimes partners will say, I'm carrying the burden of having to deal with all the kids' dysregulation or confusion or their questions or whatever it might be. And I need to give them some explanation around it. And maybe addict is not ready. The opposite can happen. Maybe addict is saying, I'm doing all this work to be transparent and to be in my honesty, and I want to tell the kids. And partner might be saying, I'm not ready in my own healing. I'm just starting to be able to regulate myself. I'm just coming through my betrayal trauma. When or if we tell the kids, I have to feel like I feel like I have to deal with it, and I'm not in the place to hold that. So part of this process too is to just get you ready to work through these things, to feel better equipped to be able to do it, so that both of you are ready at the same time, or as close as you can be at the same time. What words do we use? What language do we use? Do we use the term sex addiction? Do we not? Also, very, very common question. For sure, we're going to be addressing that. And how do we tell them? Like, what is just the process? And that will also be addressed. One of the things that I would like to stress, I guess, is co-parent involvement can be very important and also really powerful. To me, co-parent involvement doesn't mean you have to be together. It doesn't mean there has to have been clarity on what's happening in the relationship. It just means that there has to be a commitment that we as parents are willing to step into this together as co-parents, as wanting the best for our child, not needing to know what's happening in our relationship or needing to be together in relationship. What this can really do for a child is it can help give them a sense of security and safety, because if they can see that both their parents can be present in this and both their parents can say, hey, we're going to be able to get through this, whatever this is looking like and through it is looking like, which you will figure out, it can give them that sense of security and trust. Like, okay, my parents, like, no matter what's happening, I can see that they can come together. So that message of solidarity is very helpful. With that, and having both parents involved, and we're going to talk about this on the next slide, it's not just, I want to be really clear as we're doing this work, it's not just the addict being present and sharing the story, it's also the partner's disclosure is really important, and I'm going to talk about why. But I want to be clear that this is for both parents to be really present, working through this and preparing their own disclosure or preparation for a conversation. Now you guys will come together and be in agreement about what is going to be told, not going to be told, language that's going to be used, not used, all of that. It's just to be noted that it's not just one parent that I encourage to have a conversation. I encourage both parents to really be present in it. And so with that being said, you will both be in this process, and I hope that both of you are able to watch these videos and work through the workbook. Let me give a little bit of space then to talking about why the partner's experience is really important, because sometimes that's the question. Sometimes it's perceived that like just the addict should be the one to share what's going on. What I find and what I have found often in my work as reoccurring is that the partner may be the primary caregiver. Not always, but the partner may be the primary caregiver. And what can happen is that when there is a discovery about a sex addiction, the partner is impacted by that. And the impact of that, them being in their betrayal trauma, might impact their capacity in parenting, their presence in parenting, their attunement in parenting. And if they are the primary caregiver particularly, that can actually be destabilizing for a child. They actually might be more impacted by the changes in the partner than they may in the addict. The addict might not have been commonly in the household or might not have been a primary caregiver or the day-to-day organizer. And so their dysregulation or their changes in behaviors might not have as much of a significant impact. The partners may. And so initially, the child might see more changes in the partner than they do actually in the addict. They might see the sudden shifts in mood. They might see difference in attention or memory. They might notice difference in patience. And this can all be really confusing for a child. I want to stress here, adult or minor. Even if your children are out of the household, they might notice changes in the partner before they notice changes in the addict. The other thing is that the partner might be spending more time out of the household than maybe they did before, especially if they were the primary caregiver. Maybe they're going to groups now. Maybe they're in therapy. Then maybe they're in couples therapy. Maybe they also have support meetings or just like support meetups. All of these things, maybe they need to be going, maybe they went to an intensive, maybe they went to some recovery support. So all of that might be more, like it might rock a child more than actually the addict who maybe was out of the household more regularly. This might not apply to you, this might apply to you. So this is why I'm just noting this right here. What is not uncommon, if this is the setup, is that children may find themselves more angry at the partner at first than the addict. They might resent the partner. They might feel like the partner is the one causing the problems or blame the partner or become angry at the partner. Like, why aren't you just okay? Like if so-and-so, the other parent, you just need to get over it or da-da-da. And partners can feel that. If you are a partner that feels that, that as I'm saying that to you, like you feel how your child is suddenly angry at you and doesn't even understand the full story of what's going on. In the opposite, though, actually, you might have a child that comes in uber protective of the partner. So they might see their dysregulation, the partner's dysregulation. They might see the partner having difficulty with attention. They might see the partner crying, and they might find that they become protective. And that also can be destabilizing for the child. That also can even be unhealthy for the child, right? Like that they start feeling like they need to be a protective one. They need to be the one that's like the pseudo partner to that parent. So these are really important reasons why giving voice to the partner experience is is imperative. Things and like things that I sometimes hear is, why did mom suddenly start crying in the car? Oh, that's why dad stopped picking us up at school. Both, if both are the primary caregiver, mom maybe was the one that was always driving them, and they would notice mom would just start crying in the car like all the time. Or maybe dad was always the one that picked them up as the primary caregiver, and maybe he had to stop picking them up at school, and maybe that's because it was too, for instance, like activating to him. Maybe it was triggering to him to see an acting out partner at school or something of the sort. So all of these things can be impactful. I'd hear mom crying in the closet, or she seemed more angry. So even though if kids don't know what's going on in terms of the addiction, and I'll say this even in the next presentation, they are often impacted by the impacts of sex addiction. So sex addiction happens, partner, let's say, is impacted, child is impacted by the partner's experience, right? So if mom is primary caregiver or partner and they are more dysregulated, have, more quick to anger, etc., that's more what the child feels, not necessarily the direct impacts of sex addiction. So that is one of the reasons why including the partner's voice is super important as well. So that wraps up our introduction. Okay, that's just like the quick overview of where we're heading. It's nice to meet you. It's good to have you here. We're going to jump into the second video, and that's where we're going to start talking about the impacts on family and children. You're going to be able to start working in your workbook with that and get the process started. See you there.